I'd been working on some other projects of my own, and they weren't ready. And the script was sent to me. I knew, of course, of the novelist, Dennis Lehane, and the 2 films that his books were made into. But I didn't know anything about the story. And I started reading it around 10:30 at night, and I had to go to sleep because I'd get up the next day to do something early in the morning. But I found I couldn't put the script down, and was constantly surprised by the different levels of the story.
I've read a few of his books in the past, and I've seen the adaptations that have become films, and so much of his writing is so rich in detail, and certainly the characters and the character dynamics lend themselves to cinema in such a fantastic way, and this Shutter Island was of that same vein. I mean, the characters almost come to life. As soon as they're adapted to cinema, you feel like they've existed already, that they're real people.
And the transformation of the main character until the very last quarter of a page. And I found it very satisfying, and I found that the way the script was constructed, particularly the ending, which is somewhat different from the book, I think, but particularly the ending, made everything worthwhile for me.
Why are you all wet, baby?
I can remember reading the script for the first time, and suddenly, at the moment where you realize that the central character is probably mad, and it doesn't come until a long way into the movie.
When I read it, I couldn't believe it. It had affected me so deeply because you're so attached to the storyline and to the truth, and to find out you've been really on a whole different journey.
The 67th patient at Ashcliffe is you, Andrew.
And so you're completely with him, you know, you're there with him, feeling that horrible feeling, and it's just so brilliantly rendered, and it's like the blood drains out of your legs, and you suddenly don't know which way is up.
Double! Andrew, no!
And I love that about this script and about this movie.
The book was written in 2002. I was very angry and very confused about where I saw the world going and where I saw my country going at that time. So angry and so confused that I couldn't write with any clarity about it. So I said, I'm going to write as obliquely about this as I possibly can. What was a time period that was like this? And I was like, McCarthyism, the 50s. And when I started looking that way, I came upon this 1 year that just seemed absolutely perfect. It seemed like a perfect mirror of where we were living then, which is 1954. And we're absolutely terrified of an atomic age. And I just said, what would this do to us? And so that was where I began to run with it. It was really a very strange experience, and I didn't want to know what I was doing. I wanted it to be whatever I could throw in that pot, throw it in the pot. I just thought, all right, I love Gothics, let's have a little fun. Let's do a Gothic. So let's look at paranoid political thrillers. Manchurian Candidate and Invasion of the Body Snatchers. I started thinking of that a lot, the Don Siegel, the original. Then all of a sudden it was just stir the pot. And then it was, can I write a book with a completely unreliable narrator? Can I do that? These were all these things that I set up for myself.
And so I've always been drawn to this sort of story, but primarily it's not necessarily the nature of where the story is told or the setting, but it's really what happens to the character of Teddy. I found to be very moving.
I killed a lot of people in the war.
It's the guilt that Teddy has that carries me through the picture.
You should have saved me.
And how he resolves to deal with that guilt is, I thought, unique in the story that Dennis Lehane pulled together and later Pelagridis wrote as a script. That's the thing that got me involved in this in the first place, by reading her version of it.
I got to talk to Dennis a few times on set. I had somewhat of a conversation with him, but I kind of really wanted to make Teddy my own. And that was, for me, a lot of my own research and self-discovery about who he was and what he was going through.
I'm not the one! Do you get it? Huh? Do you?
Leo came up and just was asking me these questions where I was thinking, how much deeper can you go into this guy? You're asking me questions I don't know the answer to, and I created him, you know?
I hope that, you know, at the end of the day, I honored what he thought Teddy was.
No patient named Andrew Latus.
Pull yourself together, Teddy.
Having worked with Leo since The Departed, Gangs of New York, The Aviator, and I thought that he should do it because I knew the different emotional and psychological levels that Teddy has to reach.
Dolores.
You have to let me go.
He could get to those emotions and get to those psychological states because I had faith and trust in him as an artist.
He's looking for some sort of truth within his actor's eyes, or he's looking for a way to navigate the scene. He lets the actors and the character work dictate almost what the entire film is. I mean, he's a master filmmaker who's made some of the best movies of all time, but it's amazing to note that he only knows how to do character pieces. You know, he only knows how to sort of navigate the human mind or portray something about the human condition, however flawed that may be.
He gives you an awful lot of freedom, and he's really supportive and keeps saying yes, and keep going. But then can, you know, when you're stuck and when you're in a pinch, he can come in and offer like just the few words that you need to sort of turn the scene around.
We were here for 3 weeks, I think, before we started shooting the movie. And that started with, you know, sitting down, talking about the characters. We talk a lot about the history, talk some mythology. And it's a very collaborative kind of rehearsal, which is really nice. And then we do a lot of reading, reread the scenes, chiseling off the rough edges, working on some rewrite stuff as we're going along with Lita, the writer, and just kind of like bumping our way through the world and making a comfortable place for us. And then we do the same thing on set. You know, one great thing about Marty is he really does love actors, and he loves the process that an actor goes through.
It's a fantastic cast, and I'm so proud to be part of it. But very daunting. I mean, it was very daunting to have to go mad on a set.
Who are these men?
With Mark Ruffalo and Leonardo DiCaprio and Sir Ben Kingsley all looking at me. Who the fuck are you?
It's all right. Okay, guys, and action!
I think all roads lead to Marty, and I'm in danger of banging on about myself, so myself excluded. I think he's cast the film brilliantly. Leo is at that Hamlet stage of his life. Mark, he radiates affection and loyalty and massive persistence, and on the set, wonderful imagination. Michelle brings a beautiful vulnerability.
I want to go home.
Max von Sydow brings towering authority.
Men like you are my specialty. Men of violence.
I know, can you imagine? You show up at a mental institution and Sir Ben Kingsley and Max von are your doctors. Oh my. Although it's kind of sexy.
All these people Marty has placed like a painter placing one color next to another for great effect.
Good. Very good. It's just like the virtuoso filmmaking of Martin Scorsese in this type of picture. It's his playground. It's everything that he loves about film, the period he loves, the style he loves, the genre he loves.
In terms of the music, the picture, I decided that an old friend of mine, Robbie Robertson, who used to be a member of the band, would work on it. We worked together on a number of pictures, and I said, instead of having a score written for the picture, what if we take music from modern composers and try to do something where you use sections and move them around and create a world of sound? And so we pulled together pieces by a number of composers. There's a piece by Ingram Marshall called Fog Tropes that begins the film on the boat. You don't quite know whether it's a foghorn or it's music.
It's just water. It's a lot of water.
There's a piece called On the Nature of Daylight by Max Richter, a beautiful theme that is used in a dream scene where he dreams of his wife in the apartment.
I'm not gonna leave. I love you so much.
All these different pieces were pulled together and used in different ways to create the score, a kind of tapestry of emotion that reflected what Teddy and what Chuck and what Dr. Coley, all of them, would be feeling in those 3 days in which the story takes place.
Did you ever meet a patient named Andrew Latis?
No. Never heard of it.
A lot of what we talked about was how would this appear on second viewing. So it was, in a way, portraying sort of two different performances.
So tell me again about your partner.
What partner? They were both intrinsically linked together, but we had to understand throughout the entire course of the filming that we were on a tightrope.
All the actors are playing another role. They're playing different parts, really.
This paper could be important.
Excuse me, doctor, but we're gonna have to hold on to this.
Not necessarily Michelle, because she is the one character. She's usually in the flashbacks or the hallucinations. But Emily Mortimer, Sir Ben Kingsley, Mark Ruffalo, the guards.
First time on ward C, huh?
John Carroll Lynch, all the nurses. Every one of them are all playing characters who are playing roles in different ways.
Stop looking at it. Stop looking at it.
So that when you look at the film, the second or third time, you look at the frame, you see who's in the frame all the time. Usually there's guards, there's people looking a certain way. Every time you hear a line of dialogue from these other characters, it has a different meaning now.
You don't know me.
Oh, but I do.
You don't
Oh, I know you. We've known each other for centuries.
And so this was a kind of a challenge to work on the picture and direct the film, because we had to direct 3 films at once. Every scene is 3 or 4 different levels.
Continue your investigation and we'll do all we can to help.
This investigation is over. Come on, Chuck.
There's all these little things hidden throughout the movie that we tried to put in here and there.
The first moment Scorsese puts in, which is not in the book because it's Teddy's perspective, so I couldn't have put it in. But it's a camera shot he does right when they get off the boat. They arrive on the boat, they get off. The assistant warden and his men are meeting them.
Never seen a marshal's badge before.
And everybody surrounds DiCaprio and Ruffalo. And you realize the second time, they just handed over their charge, an insane person. And everybody's looking to make sure he's not gonna go nuts on them in that moment. It's an amazing shot, because what you feel the first time you're viewing it is pure threat. These guys look like they're going to kill this guy for no good reason. And then you see it the second time and you realize, no, they're scared shitless. You know, they're handing this very dangerous guy over.
Your boys seem a little on edge, Mr. McPherson.
Right now, Marshal, we all are.
Then the second clue is the first clue in the book. It's the way Mark Ruffalo hands his gun over. He has trouble getting the holster out. And a U.S. Marshal would never have trouble unclipping his holster. It would be second nature to him. And yet Mark is like, you know, oh, okay, here. And that was the first clue I put in the book. Was a supposedly experienced U.S. Marshal uncomfortable with a firearm.
There's the scene in the common room where Teddy and Chuck interviewed the orderlies and the doctors about the missing patient prisoner.
Miss Solando was put in her room for lights out. Does anyone here know what she did before that?
And I think that one, you could continually find certain levels in all the different behavioral patterns of the people in the frame. I like very much the demeanor of all the actors sitting there, the orderlies, the nurse who's being questioned, or she says,
Define unusual.
Excuse me?
This is a mental institution for the criminally insane. Usual isn't a big part of our day.
Very interestingly, she's being interviewed by a detective. Why is she giving such sarcastic answers?
And they're taking a tiny bit of offense at his tone, because really he's a patient talking to them. And they're used to talking to him, not having to act as if they respect him.
Did anything happen last night during group therapy that was more, let's say, I don't know, memorable than...
Normal?
Exactly.
No.
It took 2 days and nights to shoot that one scene. And finally, I just wanted some reaction shots of all the orderlies sitting there while the questioning was going on. They had gone through this for 2 days and nights, lots of different angles. So I said, I want the look on your faces just exactly the way you look now, listening to me, because you're so bored at this point, having done the scene over and over again. Just give me that total look of you want to go home, you want to get away from this room, you don't want anything to do with this scene at all in the movie. I said, just give me that look. And I think that's what came across.
Oh, there's so many amazing character moments. And it has to do with a lot of these performances. I mean, there's so many great people that came in for one day and, you know, knew a page and a half of dialogue straight.
You know that she drowned her own kids? You kill your own kid? Gas the bitch.
I was able to look across a table from them or look into their eyes and say, wow, I completely believe these people.
You seem quite normal. I mean, in comparison to the other patients here.
The difference is most people don't kill their husbands with an axe.
When Bridget Kearns is asked about Dr. Sheehan, she said he's not hard on the eyes, my mother used to say. And the detective that Leo's playing says,
Did he ever make a pass at you?
She becomes very nervous.
No. No, Dr. Sheehan's a good doctor. He would never.
The editing there was kind of fun to do. Enjoyable, I should say, because Robin's acting in it, the woman who plays Bridget Kearns.
Could I have a glass of water, please?
No problem.
Look at her eyes, the editing, who we choose to cut to.
Nice day for a stroll, don't you think? Towards sea, for example. Maybe we'll run into Andrew latest. I've tried to put little things in that on first viewing you might think is strange, but it doesn't raise a red flag, you know? Did you ever find ladies?
No, I never found him.
Well, I got his intake form. Yeah, take a look.
I'll look at it later.
What's the matter, boss?
That's what I think is remarkable about the performance, because if you look back on certain scenes, again, you see him not only playing the observer and not only playing the doctor, but playing the conflicted guy who's actually becoming this guy's friend.
Now we're trapped here on this rock, on this island, with no one to rely on but each other. And now you're acting like...
Like what? Like what? How am I acting?
We're always experimenting with not overplaying it. How am I listening and responding to certain things? How am I looking at him? Is he getting upset? Is it starting to work on him emotionally. But I also can't do that as his partner, too.
So what are you really here to do, Ted?
So I was always trying to find a balance between those things, yeah.
I don't know how these guys do it.
It was very daunting taking on the role of somebody that's pretending to be mad. And you never actually see me sane in the movie, apart from one shot at the very end. And so I only knew what my character was like mad. I didn't know what the sane version of the girl that I was playing was. And I have this big mad scene which could be the undoing of me professionally.
Don't you know how lonely I've been, Jim?
Although I keep thinking there is an escape clause, which is if I'm very unconvincing and bad as a mad person, I can always say, well, I was not a mad person. I was a sane person pretending to be mad. It was my plan.
I buried you. I buried an empty casket. Your body rained down lumps of flesh eaten by sharks.
The thing about that, the whole business of trying to work out how in the world to act somebody who has murdered their 3 children.
Aren't they beautiful?
And Martin Scorsese put us in touch with this brilliant professor.
We were really very fortunate to have Dr. James Gilligan as our technical advisor. His book on violence is a classic, and he was not only an authority on it, but he also understood the nature of the telling of a story. That the story that we're telling, that Dennis Lehane has told in his novel, isn't literal in that sense. It kind of pulls together many, many different things over the past 40, 50 years and puts it in one place so that it's heightened. It may not have all happened that way in 3 days, but it has happened that way.
This is a game. All of this is for you. You're a fucking rat in a maze.
It's true that the plot of the movie, departs significantly from literal reality in the sense of how I or any other psychiatrist would go about trying to treat people who were violent and mentally ill.
Unless we can bring you back to sanity now, permanent measures will be taken to ensure you can't hurt anyone ever again.
But I felt that what Dennis Lehane and Martin Scorsese did was to find a way to express kind of metaphorically what was going on in the minds of the major characters.
Are you real?
For example, the main character who's a patient in the movie is somebody who has experienced significant trauma and, like many people who have been overwhelmingly traumatized, experiences a kind of split personality.
When I talked to Dr. Gilligan, we started to uncover multiple scenarios that this could be, and the only conclusion, we boiled it down to dissociative identity disorder, which basically means your mind sort of fragments into a different personality.
So you're my new partner.
And you take on somebody else's life and their attributes and their attitude and their backstory, and it's all to avoid the pain that you suffer in your own life. The interesting thing about that is that you have a complete memory loss of who you are.
Wounds can create monsters, and you are wounded, Marshall.
I wouldn't say that the plot of the movie is a literal photographic description of how an actual mentally ill person might experience this, but it does express the notion that a person who's been just overwhelmingly traumatized and is living with memories that are just emotionally unbearable will sometimes try to escape those memories by creating an imaginary world and an imaginary identity.
She's created an elaborate fictional structure. She gives us all parts to play in that fiction.
Yes, we did talk a little about that, Dr. Gilligan and I, the fact that this sort of strange other reality, this sort of meta-reality is set up by schizophrenics after they've committed a crime like this, and it's just the sort of safest place to be in a way,
Remember when we stayed in the cabin in the summer, Teddy? We were so happy. Yeah, I talked to him a lot about what creates the situation for a woman to think her best option is to kill her kids, and usually, often herself.
Michelle Williams was trying to understand how could a mother behave in such a way. And I described mothers I've worked with who have done things like this.
So sorry, baby.
One of the characteristics of mothers who kill their own children is often that they are committing what, if I can use the sort of paradoxical terminology, is sometimes called altruistic homicide.
The women often see it really as their best option in a strange way, in a strange, demented, sick way. It's an act of love.
That is, they are actually trying to save their children from suffering. It's not that they're trying to expose them to suffering. They are in a delusional world where their imagination has run away with them and they've lost touch with reality.
They'll be our living dolls,
And they think the children are doomed to overwhelming suffering, for which the mothers often blame themselves.
Dr. Gilligan said that very often a kind of peace has descended over them because it was this awful task.
Give me a hand here.
That they felt that really they were doing it for all the right reasons. And afterwards, a kind of euphoria descends on them and also a kind of calm, you know, because they performed what was the most difficult thing on earth to do.
Even these bizarre behaviors, in fact, can be understood when you think about the various different ways people can frame them and give meaning to them.
And really, he has a tremendous amount of sympathy for the women that commit these crimes because of the reasons behind them.
I cry every night.
I think to be an actor playing roles like this requires enormous reserves of psychological strength.
Her name was Rachel. Are you going to deny that she ever lived?
I mean, just to tolerate the entering into the mindset of characters.
I'm only here because of you!
I mean, you have to be willing to take on a lot of the suffering that people in real life experience when they're going through this.
There's a lot to go through. It was kind of like one of those nightmares that you can't wake up from. It just keeps changing and it gets sort of worse and worse.
You have to let it go! I can't! My name is Edward Daniels!
I know there's one scene that I'm particularly proud of in this movie, and that's the scene where he sees his children. I think that we were both sort of taken aback, Scorsese and myself, about how intensely emotional that was going to be.
That was probably the hardest shooting we've ever done, because in order for Leo to work out how he had to deal with the children in the lake.
Where are the kids?
What I mean by that is that you can write it in the book and you can write it on the page in the screenplay saying he goes in the water and takes the children from the water and puts them on the shore. Well, you still have to go in the water.
Oh my God.
The actual lake, not special visual effects here. And take the bodies of the children.
Oh my God!
It's what, as a father, you would do. Do you try to revive one?
Come on, come on!
Do you take one and bring him on the lake, and do you leave the other two in the water? Or do you take all three at once? When do you realize that they're gone?
Please, God, no!
It was a remarkable day.
There's something about that scene that tapped into who Teddy was and his pain that until I did that scene, I didn't quite understand, you know, the gravity of what he was dealing with.
Put them at the table, Andrew. We'll dry them off. We'll change their clothes.
You know, there was always sort of an undercurrent running along the whole thing because you knew where it wound up.
Set me free.
So it wasn't really the lightest, easiest set.
I love you, Magda.
A lot of the help that I was really being asked for was to provide the background, the context of this. I was the medical director of Bridgewater, that is the head of psychiatric services for this prison mental hospital for a number of years, beginning in the late 70s and continuing until I finally left that position in 1992. So I was asked to talk to the set designer and describe to him what the old Bridgewater had been like in the 1950s. Of course, it's been torn down now, so there was no way that this film company could see them. They don't exist any longer. I simply described what they were like.
It could be a normal place, like a normal hospital, but when you go inside, it's like you're inside your brain. And this is what I like in this movie, to discover this trip. Then you can be lost or you can look at different kind of a world.
When he came on the set, he said this is pretty much what it was like. He said he had seen whole hallways, major spaces like that hallway that Mark and Leo walk down and get scared at the end of it. Filled with naked men with straw on the floor. When he was one of the group that came in to revamp Bridgewater.
Yes, the years during which I was directing the treatment programs at the Bridgewater Prison Mental Hospital were very turbulent, in much the same way as described in the movie.
Do you know the state of the mental health field these days, gentlemen?
Remember, Dr. Cawley in the movie tells Teddy that there's a war going on within psychiatry. And it struck me a lot of the conflict in the movie, although it's not emphasized, but it's in the background, is really the conflict between two attitudes toward the treatment of people who are mentally ill and violent.
I must repeat my insistence that all Ward C patients be placed in manual restraints.
If they're manacled to the floor, they'll die. And you can live with that, can you?
And this is what I was really presiding over at Bridgewater. Just like Dr. Cawley in the movie, we were trying to move the hospital away from what I think of as a kind of medieval model of regarding the violent mentally ill as kind of incurable, untreatable, kind of subhuman.
The old school believes in surgical intervention, psychosurgery.
Giving them lobotomies, a form of brain surgery that removes the capacity to have normal human feelings.
Some say the patients become reasonable, docile. Others say they become zombies.
Or shock treatment. Like Dr. Cully, I was trying to replace that model with a much more humanistic, and I thought humane, model.
I'm trying to do something that people don't understand, and I'm not going to give up without a fight.
I like Dr. Cawley very much because I think what he embodies in the film is unconditional love, that he will never, never let go of the patient under his care.
I have this radical idea that if you treat a patient with respect, try and understand, you just might reach him.
This is in the 50s, where there was quite a battle raging between various schools of psychiatry, from the medieval to the modern.
We're on the front lines of a war here, old boy. And right now, it all comes down to you.
It's that transitional point where I feel like Dr. Cawley is trying to lock into this tiny moment where he's able to really treat patients for the first time one-on-one, you know, understand the depths of where that pain comes from rather than drugging them or using these crude methods.
The warden and the board of overseers are determined something be done. It's been decided. They'll lobotomize you, Andrew. Do you understand?
Going somewhere?
You see, on the other hand, there's Dr. Naring. He represents another side of the profession.
If it were up to me, I'd put all 42 in wards A and B in manual restraints.
Well, I'd say Dr. Naring in this movie represents the old school of psychiatry who really don't see the mentally ill as capable of any meaningful kind of recovery. In a way, don't see them really as human beings anymore.
Wouldn't you agree? When you see a monster, you must stop it.
So he's the other side of the war in psychiatry.
And who raised you, Marshal?
Me? Wolves.
What interested me in Dr. Gilligan in his book Violence is the nature of his dedication and his heart and brilliant approach to many of the patients he dealt with. He found something human in them. He did make contact, and to know that there are doctors out there, men and women out there who believe in this and actually get some results through patience and love. This is very, very interesting to me.
Well, the 50s were the era, both in Massachusetts and I'd say in American psychiatry in general, when we were, as a nation and as members of the psychiatric profession, were trying to move the treatment of the mentally ill away from the old kind of warehouse hospitals that came to be called snake pits, and to create modern, truly therapeutic hospital facilities. At Bridgewater, i.e. Ashcliffe, that meant moving away from the idea that this is primarily a prison to the idea that it is primarily a hospital. And this was happening all over the country at that time, but it was particularly acute at Bridgewater because the changes taking place were the result of a class action suit in the federal courts in which the U.S. District Court in Boston concluded that it was unconstitutional to commit people to a mental hospital against their will for treatment and then not provide treatment.
Well, the reason I picked 1954 was the year that Thorazine and lithium were both approved by the FDA. So it began what was known as pharmacology, the beginning of drugs for patients. Before that, you had what was known as psychosurgery, and you had talk therapy. So there was 3 different schools of thought, and they all came to a head in 1954. That was the year. They were beginning to believe, just beginning, by the way, to believe that maybe lobotomizing people was a hair barbaric.
They're gonna take me to the lighthouse.
Yes, the villain behind the scenes is the threat of sort of annihilation by lobotomy, which was, I think, something that was hugely fashionable at the time that this film is set. It was really used in a very widespread way at around this time in the 50s.
Tell me what goes on in that lighthouse.
Is where they create the ghost.
And what they did for lobotomies back then was they would do what was known as a transorbital lobotomy, and they would stick a spike, basically an ice pick, through your eye, into your brain, and swirl a few things around. So this was the state of psychology. There's nothing in Shutter Island, not a single thing, that was fantastical for the time. It just seems that way.
Ironically, Dr. Egon Moniz, a Portuguese surgeon, received the first Nobel Prize in medicine that had ever been given in psychiatry for inventing this technique of treating severe mental illness. He was doing this at a time when so little was known about the treatment of severe mental illness. in which the suffering involved and the abnormal behavior, including violence toward others or toward the self, was so extreme and uncontrollable that people were casting about for any desperate kind of solution to solve a desperate problem.
There was a period of time when truly lobotomies was the preferred scientific method to treating an entire gamut of mental disorders. Essentially scrambled this membrane in one's mind and messed their life up forever. I mean, a lot of people never recovered. A lot of people became more sort of sedate, but they were unable to function the way they were before. And it was a very horrific, crude method of treating people.
Even Rosemary Kennedy, who was the sister of JFK, had mental issues. She was displaying errant behavior as a young girl, and this was embarrassing to the Kennedy family, and she was lobotomized.
It's barbaric. Unconscionable.
So I think lobotomy, because it was so over-applied, and also because it is so irreversible, and because it affects a part of the body that is clearly you might say, the biological seat of the mind and the personality. Lobotomy became a kind of symbol of science gone mad and of mad doctors, you know, Dr. Faustus or Dr. Frankenstein. I think it is a powerful symbol, and the movie, I think, draws on it very appropriately and in good taste.
50 years from now, people will look back and say, here, this place is where it all began. And we tested patients on Shutter Island.
We still don't have a lot of answers about how to treat people. And right now, people are being drugged to extremes.
What should be a last resort is becoming a first response. Give them a pill, put them in a corner, it all goes away.
But certainly every day, we're understanding more and more. But specifically in that time period, there were very crude methods.
There was one particular advocate of lobotomy in this country. Dr. Freeman became notorious or famous or well-known for traveling around the country, training all kinds of people in how to do lobotomies, applying them to a much too broad, in my opinion, set of diagnostic entities or types of mental illness and mental disorder.
When you have a situation where you're going around the country in a car and going to a hospital and saying, okay, give me your worst cases, line them up, 25, 40, whatever, and start doing these operations on the road. There were people who believed in it at the time, and Max von Sydow's character firmly believes in it. He's not a villain. He believes in this.
Gotta get off this rock, Chuck. Get back to the mainland. Whatever the hell's going on here, it's bad. This is sort of that turning point in this movie, and unfortunately, Teddy and what happened to him is too much for him to take. I loved it so much.
I found the ending of the movie terribly poignant, really tragic, and I could understand the sense of defeat and grief that Dr. Colley felt.
And I was profoundly sort of moved towards the end of the film, not just by what happened to Teddy, but about the complex sort of role-playing that everyone took on just to treat this patient. And it's very moving. And, you know, you feel a lot for these doctors that have tried everything.
I wish I could let you just live in your fantasy world. I really do.
When this patient whom he had been bending over backwards trying to rescue had proved to be, in a way, unrescuable. What Teddy did, I think, at the end of the story, when he essentially forces Dr. Colley to hand him over to Dr. Nering for a lobotomy, is that he wasn't literally committing a suicide, but he was committing a symbolic suicide.
Which would be worse? To live as a monster, or to die as a good man? What I think this movie does portray in a lot of ways is a complex view into the pain associated with mental illness. And as an audience member watching, it gave me a deep understanding of some of the horrific things that people need to go through in order to not have to deal with that kind of pain.
There's a sadness to it and a resignation about life, about having had a life and having to deal with certain obligations in life, having to accept responsibility for certain things in life, and how one has to deal with that. It's freeing in a way, it's a relief, and yet there's a melancholy about it. And as sad as it could be, there's also a sweetness to it. I hope that the empathy and the caring for Teddy resonates with an audience and takes them on a voyage that touches a part of themselves, in a way, emotionally.
You can never take away all a man's memories.